Hi, everybody. I'm Bernstein, and welcome to our Boxing Hangout. This is one that I've been looking forward to because we're going to chat about something that I think is really important and becomes more important, it seems, daily in the sport of boxing, and that is the consistency of judges, how we rate judges, how we look at their performance from a quantitative and qualitative viewpoint, and Dan Parks, our esteemed producer of the Boxing Hangouts. Do you like being esteemed, Dan?
I'm esteemed today. Thank you, Al.
You're getting very esteemed at me. No, wait, that's not what that word means. Hold on. But he, as always, finds the best people to be with us. And Dan, you found somebody today to be with us who I actually have history with his family, and he's a very, very talented young man who has an endeavor that really I think it's going to be very helpful for boxing.
I think so too, Al. Part of what we've been trying to do recently is look at other options, other tools that might be used by boxing in order to help out the sport or improve the sport in any way. And while I was in the middle of that search, I ran across this gentleman here and this whole process, and it is, I think it's an outstanding tool, and I think it's something that's important for the public and everybody else get a chance to see what he's doing here.
I could not agree more, and let's bring that gentleman in right now, Matthew Podgorski, who invented the POD INDEX and who is had a terrific background in boxing as an amateur fighter, referee, and in many different areas. And Matthew, it's a delight to have you with us today.
Well, thanks for having me on this afternoon, guys. I appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Now, the POD INDEX report is something that helps people understand where judges have fallen in line in terms of their scoring over a long period of time and on individual fights. Explain a little bit exactly what the POD INDEX report does.
Sure. So at a very high level, the purpose of the POD INDEX originally and its primary function today still is to determine on a round-by-round basis how often a judge is in the majority or in the minority within that round of the three judges. So the theory being, over a large enough sample size, if a judge is in the minority of those three judges for a very disproportionate amount of time, there's something going on there. And this allows us to start the diagnostic process, to start the discussion as to why that judge is either in or out all the time. So it's just a tool basically to get the conversation started.
And if you are, and as I understand it, well, let's say we look at a boxing judge over a long period of time. You hate to say it, you could even see if he favors a certain fighter, if he seems to be for a certain group of fighters, or if a certain style of fighters, or if he just simply is off kilter and it has nothing to do with thought processes that may bias him.
Absolutely. So let's just take an example and say, in competitive fights, the average judge is, say, 85% consistent, meaning 85% of the rounds they judge in competitive fights, 85% of the rounds they judge, they are either in the majority or all three have the same. So 85 is the average. Let's say we find a judge that only is in the majority 70% of the time. We have to ask ourselves some questions. What is driving that difference? And you mentioned a half a dozen of the possibilities. It's the training. It's the geographic style of Latin American judges versus American judges. Could it be a specific style preference that they like work rate over power, that they like the guy that moves forward versus the guy that counterpunches, or could it be more cynical? Could it be that they're being influenced by a promoter? Could it be that they're being influenced by an ethnicity or a nationality? Those are things that are difficult to quantify, but they can be done, and we're starting the process to getting the answers and the conversation to be more data-based and less subjective, less normative.
You know what's fascinating is I'm sitting here listening to you say this, and I hope the people that watch this are having the same reaction I'm having. It is interesting, the day and age we live in. If there was no Matthew Podgorski who decided at some point, and I'm going to ask you in a moment a little more personally how you decided, we wouldn't have this. And it seems with all the databases and all the tools at our disposal, it's amazing we don't have something like this in boxing. We're just on a quantitative basis. You just, everyone's accountable if you're whatever you do, whether it's scoring or reffing or announcing. You can go back and look at tapes. That people haven't looked at it to do it this way.
Well, to be fair, this has been done on a limited basis. There's a gentleman who's the commissioner in Pennsylvania named Greg Serb.
Yeah, Greg is a
boxing guy. He
right.
started doing something similar to this, where he collects the round-by-round scores for all world title fights, and he measures how often they're in the majority or minority. But he only really took it so far, and that makes sense because he's not a private business. He's not looking to really expand this. He doesn't have the resources and some of the firepower that we have. So he did a nice first step. Right idea. I think it needed to take an influx of energy, an influx of technical capability and statistical capability to really take it to the next level, and that's what we've done. We've tried to find a way to monetize it as well.
And you mentioned that the California State Athletic Commission and Nevada State Athletic Commission, the boxing authorities in those states, that they are going to utilize your service.
That's correct. We've already been working with California for quite some time now, and as of recently, we started to work with Bob Bennett in Nevada for both boxing and MMA. So we're holding all their scores electronically for them. We're doing reporting for them. We're doing giving advice to them, consultation, anything they need. And a lot of what we do is very confidential, as you can imagine, but some of it's public. So. Yeah, but it's great because they've got somebody they can trust now that they can bounce ideas off. They can ask blunt questions and get blunt answers that are backed up by data and not by my personal opinion.
And the thing is, and I want to emphasize this isn't about Matthew Podgorski saying, gee, I think this judge doesn't understand, or this judge did a bad job, or this judge is this. You're just giving them the numbers, and you're helping them analyze those numbers, and they can make the determinations they want to make.
That's exactly right. I give advice on how to interpret the results, but
of course, sure.
Explain to them. This is not the be-all, end-all. And I wasn't planning on doing this, but now that it came up, Dan, at some point during the broadcast, we can prove that it really is just about the numbers in terms of the advice I'm giving. And if you pull my stats up, you'll see I'm a below-average judge from a consistency perspective. So,
wow.
It's not, right? Wouldn't it be hypocritical if I was 100% and it's amazing that the statistic ended up matching my personal idea? It's not. When I ran this, it's judges I would have never thought would have been right toward the top in terms of consistency. So judges,
you think in your mind maybe, boy, they're not really doing great. They're way up on the top of.
And vice versa, yeah. Every round I've ever scored, I was sure I had the right score. And
aren't we all?
Right?
Isn't that? Now, so. And this business, you obviously are a private business, and the folks that are using it, like these commissions or whatever. Who else uses your pod index?
So anywhere from, and again, we have a kind of a gag order on some of our clients, but we're working.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me who, but the general nature of who they are.
Yeah, right now we're working formally with one of the major sanctioning bodies, one of the top 4 sanctioning bodies, and again, it's a very ongoing type relationship where it's a regular type of consultation back and forth, and it's pretty cool. They're really listening and they're getting it, and they're feeding us a lot of information. We're also working with, as I mentioned, state commissions. We're on the cusp of working with any networks that are interested in working with us because we really want this ultimately. We're not making a killing on this, right? I still have a day job. This is a side job for me, kind of like YouTube Hangouts is a side job for you guys, right? Right? I'm sorry, Google Hangouts. But really, ultimately, it's for the fans too. That's why a portion of our data is public. Kind of like BoxRec, right? BoxRec makes it available to the public. Now, we don't have enough traffic to drive, ad revenue yet, but anyone can go out there and see at least the basic minority-majority round information. They can't see every dirty detail about the judge, but they can see a lot. And so a lot of it's about the fans. Well, eventually we want to get it. The network's interested. Most importantly, we want the commissions. We want promoters looking at it and managers. We want them knowing something about the judges that are being selected for their fight. They should have a say. Promoters are paying the bills. Managers and fighters' livelihoods are at stake. And because this sport is so subjective, it's my strong opinion that they should have a say in who those officials are. It's different in the NFL. In the NFL, there's such a long track record of strong management and coaching and training and evaluating of those officials that you can take it for granted you're going to get a fair shake, and if not, it's going to be fixed quickly. Boxing, as you guys know, is too decentralized, it's too fragmented, and it's got too much of a history of issues with officiating that you can't just assume on good faith
Right.
that everything's going to go smoothly.
And there is no central governing body. There really isn't, even though there are four world bodies. I happen to know one network that I think I'd like to suggest would use your service. I can't say which one.
Sounds
I
fair.
have my own personal gag order. I can't say which one, but I'm no. Yeah, I'd love to see your material on Showtime actually. And I now let's briefly throw in a little bit about you and you mentioned your day job. Explain what you do for a living and how it kind of leads you to this.
Sure. So on the day job side, to support my wife and my wonderful 2 children,
Which is pretty essential. Yeah.
pretty essential right now, and to pay my taxes, of course. I work. I work for.
Do that in.
Well, I live in Illinois. I don't live in Nevada like you do.
I think that.
We have a state income tax here, unfortunately, so a big one, a 5% one. Not quite Dan's level at California, but
no, he's in real trouble.
yeah,
Sorry.
Nevada, Texas, Florida. You guys have the luxury of that 0 state income tax. So anyway, back on point. So I work for a food company, U.S. Foods. We're headquartered here in Rosemont, soon to be acquired by Cisco, the largest food distributor in the U.S. But my expertise here is on process improvement. I'm a professional problem solver, and I use data to solve those problems or to get to the answers. So I've been doing that for a long time. I've got a graduate degree in economics, and I've got a black belt in Six Sigma and Lean. So I hate bragging. I'm from the Midwest. As you know, we're taught not to do that, but
We are taught not to do that. That's
but
true.
you asked the question, and the credentials sort of matched up with my passion, and my passion being, boxing and sports.
No, that's great, and it does. And I did that for very specific reasons because when you put that all in a package, it shows. And the fact that you were an amateur boxer, you've reffed. Your dad, Pete Podgorski, was not only a fighter who this shows you how old I am. I believe I broadcast some of his fights, a couple of his fights, and of course have broadcast many in which he's reffed in, and he's a well-known and respected boxing figure as well. So you guys have that in you have that in your genes. The only thing is the only place I take issue with the Podgorski family or you is I believe you root for the wrong baseball team, don't you?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this offline, but I'm sorry to say for you, even though I was born and raised in Chicago, my grandfather started a tradition in 1945 to become a St. Louis Cardinals fan. So I believe the story goes that he had a bet going with a buddy. He's an electrician, his fellow electrician, and he had a bet going that the St. Louis Cardinals would beat the St. Louis Browns in the St. Louis Subway Series or St. Louis L-Trek Series.
Yeah.
And ever since then, he became a Cardinal fan, and my dad and I. So other than that, I think we're good though, right, Al?
Yeah, no, we're okay. That's not. Listen, this is America, where you get past differences in religion, politics, and even rooting for baseball teams. I'm a Cubs fan, which everybody knows. So the Cardinals especially. Although it's such a misnomer because while Cub fans are taught to hate the Cardinals, we really should just hate every National League team because it's every National League team that has tortured the Cubs. So why would we pick on the Cardinals?
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, it's a great rivalry. I've seen I've seen the way Red Sox and Yankees fans talk to each other, and I wouldn't bring my kids to those games, but it's a pleasure going to a Cubs Cardinals game.
That's a very good. You know what? That's really a good point. And you see in St. Louis Cub fans all in a block in the seats. The same in Chicago. So I do agree with you. There's not that kind of animosity. Now, and besides, we also established that in my long-running Bruce Springsteen, Bob Seger debate that I've had online and tweeting and everywhere. I am, of course, a Midwesterner like you, so I'm a Bob Seger guy, and you are a Bob Seger guy. You love Bob Seger, so that eliminates any concern over the baseball.
Yeah, I think both artists are talented, but it's hard to explain. But I just something about Bruce Springsteen, it just gets a little repetitive, a little irritating after about 45 minutes.
See, now you're going to. I shouldn't have dragged you in on this. Now there's going to be a hit list out on you like there is on me. And Bob Seger has a new album, doesn't he, Dan?
Bob Seger has a brand new album out, and the first 2 songs have already been released. We were just listening to it a second ago.
Great stuff. All right. Now back to this. Dan, you may have a question to chime in on here with Matthew.
Absolutely. Matt, what I'd like to do, if it's okay, I want to bring up your website and show off your website. And can you talk a little bit about what somebody would be looking at that comes to your website, and this is the setup that we have right now. I'll make sure that everybody can see it here. And tell us what we're looking at right now if a public came to this site and they were looking at this right now.
Sure. So this is the main page of the Pod Index, and again, we give some free information out here. At the top there, you can see there's some filters to allow you to pivot the report, so you're not just stuck looking at certain criteria. So you can look at either boxing or mixed martial arts. Right now, it's on boxing, which is what we want. You can also decide, do you want to see all fights, or do you want to see fights that were scheduled for 10 rounds or more? And I think it's important to keep it filtered at 10 right now, which really looks at championship level fights, which are the most important. You've also got a sample size, which is important too. You don't want to be making any assumptions on judges when they don't have a large enough sample size. So right now we're defaulted to, they have to have at least 100 rounds in our system to be even looked at. And then you can sort it how you want to sort it, either alphabetically, which is more politically correct, or you could sort it by most consistent. And right now it's sorted by most consistent.
Yes.
And as you can see, the most important, so we kind of have two categories here. We have difficult fights to judge and easy fights to judge. My recommendation to my client is to really only look at the difficult fights to judge, unless there's something really goofy sticking out on the easy fights. Easy fights are fights that were, say, 120 to 108 were the final scores, or 119, 109. What are we really going to learn about a judge that scored fights like that? So we kind of put those in a separate bucket, and they're there for reference, but for ranking purposes, for sorting purposes, we're looking at your percent with majority in the difficult fights.
Wow, that's fascinating. This is a great graphic. It really is a great graphic, and of course people will see. Now, the one thing that jumps out at you, we're going to talk about in a little is, there's Guido Cavalieri, who had the 115-112 score in Mayweather-Maidana, which was the closest. That was one of the times. So his ranking may go down just a smidge because he was, although not very much, because he was he was different in his overall score, but was probably not by that much though. So it really wasn't that big a deal. But you look at all those judges, and it's fun when people get a chance to look at it. Go ahead, Dan. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was going to say, interestingly though, even though Guido Cavalieri's total score might be the most concerning to the general public, and also based on our review, from a round-by-round perspective, he was actually in the majority in all 12 rounds. So his score actually went up a little bit, and this fight put him over the 100 minimum sample size and put him in the rankings. So that's why that's not the only metric we look at, is just the percent majority by the round. We also look at some other metrics.
That's great. That's a really good point. That explains it well.
Can you talk a little bit more about the process that you go through bringing in the other judges to watch at the same time? And I'll bring up the live review graphic from the last Mayweather-Maidana fight while you talk about that.
Great. So in addition to tracking the round-by-round scores and their consistency, we also do scoring reviews. Sometimes they're live, and sometimes they're after the fact. In this particular case, for the Mayweather-Maidana fight, we have a pool of judges. We have about 20 judges right now. They're professional judges with varying levels of experience and with diversity in terms of their geographic location and who they work for, which sanctioning bodies. In this particular fight, we hired 3 judges to score the fight live, round by round, watching it on Showtime pay-per-view with the sound muted. So they didn't know what the real judges' scores were. They didn't know what each other's scores were, and hopefully they were able to ignore what Steve Farhood's score was on the screen. I asked them to do their best to just, nothing wrong with Steve's scores. I'm just saying we just don't want them to be influenced. Right. So as you can see, this is an example of the results of it. So interestingly, though, the review judges, which are the 3 scores on the left, had a much wider margin, which I think reflected more the general public's score. I could be wrong. They varied between 2 and 3 rounds for Maidana, whereas the 3 official judges on the right actually had it 4 rounds for Maidana each, and Guido Cavalieri had 5 rounds for Maidana. So just 2 different totally perspectives, watching it on TV versus watching it in person.
That's intriguing. And the interesting thing about this, Dave Moretti, who had scored the fight for 116-112, the last fight for Mayweather, the 2 rounds in which he was in the minority, they weren't both for the same fighter. So that's an intriguing fact, too, when you look at it. One was leaning to Maidana and one was to Mayweather, but it didn't agree with the other 2 judges. But, yeah, that's fascinating. And this would be under, this one, you could here's a good question. Was this under the category of easy or hard fights to score? Because all three judges agreed, and it was a 116, 111 on one of them, and where would this fall, in which category?
So this would fall into the difficult to judge category.
Yeah.
The cutoff is right around anything closer than, say, 118, 110.
Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah. So about 65 to 70% of fights that aren't first round knockouts, 65 to 70% of fights fall into the difficult category, and about 30% fall. So this was kind of in closer toward the easier, but within the difficult category.
That makes sense, and that graphic you're looking at right now shows you where everybody fell in line on this particular fight. This fist fight, of course, is one that was filled with all kinds of ramifications for judges. The previous one, which there was a little controversy about, so much attention focused on it that it's very hard to, are people doing preconceived notions, etc. So this one was an interesting one as an example. Now, and these three judges you mentioned, they're all professionals in different places, so you kind of mix it up to feel like you've got some kind of pretty diverse group doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I usually have at least, now sometimes I use 5 review judges. When 3, I'm limited to the diversity. But yeah, usually I try to have a Latin American based judge, a U.S. judge, and then a non-U.S. non-Latin American judge. We also do, I don't know if we want to jump into it now, but we also do some advanced regression statistics on judges in that partnership with CompuBox I was telling you about. Where we try to determine the judge's style preference, whether they overcompensate for work rate, and we even try to put a level of diversity within the review judges of their style preference.
Wow,
so we try to at least always have one judge that likes work rate over power.
So when you give data to somebody, whoever it is, you're not just giving them raw numbers about, okay, here they did this, they did that. You're breaking it down even further, where you may take a style and say here's how they are. They're even, pretty much, fall on both sides of the fence on scoring when they're doing it with clearly someone that's known as a boxer and a mover, and then here's a guy that's more of a brawler, etc. So you narrow it down sometimes even to that, and then of course they're free to do what they want with those numbers. And the CompuBox, which you mentioned, of course, for the people that don't know, for whatever reason, they do the punch counts both on HBO and Showtime and on ESPN. And I know some people, I know the folks at CompuBox very well, and I think their service is an excellent one. Clearly, they're like everyone. They're not always perfect. You can't always be perfect, but they certainly, whether you agree with the numbers that are landed or not, they sure are pretty darn close on the numbers thrown. And you can look at things like activity because of their service, right?
Absolutely. We have a tremendous amount of confidence in the data we get from CompuBox, like you said, especially on the punches thrown side. I know they've done their own internal measurement systems, and they found the punches thrown is extremely accurate. And so again, when you do something unique, which I don't think anyone's ever done before, is take individual round-by-round punch stats, overlay that with individual judges' scores, and you get a lot of data, enough data, you can actually do some cool things. And so if you want a specific example, we did a review for an organization on the Shumanov-Hopkins scoring, where I believe it was ended up being a split decision. Did it not?
Maybe. It was one judge did have it really close.
Yeah, I want to say a Panamanian or a Central American judge
it was
had
a strange scorecard,
Yeah, he had it either even or he had it one point for Shumanov, and we did a review on that fight, and we really dug into the details. Not only did we have the official reviews of the judges, we actually had the CompuBox punch stats. We looked at the judge's history, and one particular judge ended up having an overcompensation for a certain style preference. I'll let you guys fill in the blanks. I'm not gonna go take it all the way there, but that's a really good tool, not to degrade the judge, not to ban the judge, but to coach and train the judge and say, hey, I know you've been doing this for a long time, but have you considered the possibility that you're overcompensating for punches thrown? And here's some data to back it up, and let's review a few fights and see what you think if you watch these again now. So that's the type of detail we're able to go in for some of our paying clients.
And boy, does that! Oh, I'm sorry, Dan. I just want to say that speaks, and then you go. That speaks volumes to the idea that you can help these individual judges. It's not just about lambasting them or singling them out for blame or criticism or penalizing them. It's to help them get better. Go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
I was going to ask, because we've had a couple of conversations about how do we improve boxing? How do we improve the judging overall? If you could wave a magic wand and come up with a new process, and we've heard all kinds of different things from elevating to adding extra, what would you do? What would be your first steps to improve judging, or try to get it to a place where we might get more consistent reviews?
Sure. So yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. Again, this is more opinion than any data or facts I have. But my opinion is, number one, I think there's probably too many hands in the cookie jar. I know some of my fellow judges are not going to want to hear this, but I think there's too many judges working title fights, and as a result, it becomes too much of a part-time job. Major League Baseball umpires, that's their full-time job. That's what they do, and they get paid well. NFL referees and judges, although it's a part-time job, it's a pretty darn steady part-time job. They're working every Sunday, and there's a tremendous amount of regular training. Boxing is kind of a part-time job for these guys, and that's a bit of a problem. As far as the positioning, I do think we need to experiment, and like I said, it's experimentation, not a mass change, with where the judges sit. I don't know exactly how the mechanics or the logistics would work out with blocking views, but I really like to experiment with the tennis model. Having judged many fights myself, I have a hard time looking up. I have a hard time when the fighters are on top of me, and I have a hard time with the lights and the ropes. I'd love to be kind of sitting where those line tennis judges are, elevated and looking down. There's probably a dozen other things we can do. I'd love to see the judges have better angles and better views, so maybe some support from TV monitors someday in the future, where between rounds for the first 15 seconds they could look at a few cuts. Again, that would have to be very experimental. But.
Right, with no commentary, right? Only the environmental sounds, but not commentary from the announcers.
Yeah, absolutely. And why couldn't we, in theory, take the for really big fights, right? It's not a question of money. We're talking about a very small portion of the total spend of an event. Why not have the three professional judges at ringside, and then 3 more professional judges watching it in that network feed? And now all 6 of the scores are the official scores. It's just an idea. I mean, there's not a tremendous amount of risk in doing it, and if it doesn't work and if it's a waste, then you stop doing it.
I think that you hit on a couple different things here that I want to comment on. One, the angle of judges. It's if somebody's right in front of you, and the guy who's got his back to you, you literally will not be able to see exactly sometimes when a punch lands to the person who's on the ropes in front of you. You're looking up through ropes. You're not positioned perfectly. And there's ropes in front of you, and there's lighting, and all the things you talked about. So I think it's very difficult. I've long been the advocate that actually you see a fight much better on a monitor. I haven't looked, and I'm going to make what some people might think of as a strange admission. In the last 25 years of announcing boxing, I have looked at the monitor 90% of the time. I have looked at the monitor almost exclusively. I know many people in other sports who don't ever look at the field of play. They look at what the people are seeing at home. Now, part of that's a broadcasting thing, because you can't talk about something that's not on the screen, but you assume during the action everything is on the screen. But I think you see the fight much better overall. Now, I did a commentary, which is going to be up on the Boxing Channel at boxingchannel.com sometime very shortly, and people can check to see if it gets there, or if it's there when we have this Hangout on. But I suggested this. I suggested that they should take the rule book and throw out the words effective aggression, ring generalship, and anything that's extraneous to punches being landed, and make one statement about how many punches are landed and that they are clean punches that are appropriate punches to the body or the head. And then I said, and the CompuBox guys will tell you, you can't count punches if you watch both fighters. Each of them assign some of the one fighter. But even though that's true, the judges have to have something to base they have to have their own opinions and then base their scoring on at least their own opinions. So I say have two giant buttons in front of them so that they don't have to look down. They're so big that they can't miss them. Mm-hmm. One is for the red corner, one is for the blue corner. As they do it, they touch when they think somebody's landed a punch, and then at the end of the round they hit a little button and it gives them a printout. Mm-hmm. They may know that they may be a little off in the numbers, but they will actually be getting their own opinion reinforced in their mind as to, at that moment, who did I think was landing punches? And then they can make a determination about, whether they want to revise what they thought about. Mm-hmm. So my feeling is, because at the end of the day, the big issue is that people end up scoring fights, and your surface kind of shows that. People end up scoring fights based on many different criteria, so all of a sudden styles are involved. See, I would like to get it to the point where it doesn't matter how you fight. It does, the way you fight helps you land punches, helps you avoid punches, and so, but everyone can't fight in the same style because everyone isn't physically built the same. Everyone doesn't have the same skill set. Everybody doesn't have the same trainers. There's all kinds of reasons why boxers do things differently, and so what I want to see is all that taken out of the equation, because it means nothing. If you're a baseball hit, playing baseball, your stance at the plate means nothing, does it? It's only because it's the way you want to hit the ball. It's whether you hit a single, double, triple, or home run or an out. That's all that matters. Yeah. So there you go. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Doesn't matter if you look pretty.
Joe Morgan.
Joe Morgan, remember that? We had that, that wide stance, that nobody could figure out, and he was a great hitter. So.
And then started cocking the chicken wing when
exactly right.
It was like, wow.
So I mean, that to me, it's just to make it more. So there's some reason to, because the way it exists now, and you Matthew, you see it more dramatically because you're looking at these officials. Where I mean, to me, it's absurd to say somebody, it's true probably, to say somebody appreciates a certain style of fighting over another style of fighting. See, I actually find that reprehensible when I hear it, even though it's a true statement. And you're right to say that it probably exists. I find that reprehensible because fighter A, who's Joe Frazier, let's say, is going to fight like Joe Frazier. Now, I picked a great fighter, but, and fighter B, who's Muhammad Ali, is going to fight in his style. So at the end of the day, you have to figure out who landed punches. And whoever landed punches wins the freaking fight. And whoever didn't land punches is going to lose the fight.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it gets even more complicated, though, because...
You're not going to make this worse for me, are you?
I agree with you generically, but let's take a Paulie Malignaggi, Adrian Broner fight.
Oh, that's a perfect one. Very good.
Paulie landed more punches.
Yes.
Broner landed more power punches. So you can't say the judge was just leaning toward work rate. He was leaning toward volume and boxing skill over power.
Yes. Now, here's the question. Okay, that's a perfect fight now. Now, since we're just having now, it's not talking about Matthew Podgorski and because we're just chatting, so I don't want people to think that, you're, I don't want to put you in harm's way anyway in this conversation, because this doesn't have to do so much, although it does a little bit have to do with your system. But here's the thing then, for overall boxing scoring, how do we account then for, let's say, Paulie Malignaggi and Adrian Broner. So Paulie Malignaggi comes in there, and he could not land to the head of Adrian Broner. The height difference was an issue. He fights smaller. That was his big issue. So he threw all these combinations to the body. Some got there, some didn't get there. Okay? Here's the question, I guess, and this is the big one. If Paulie Malignaggi lands, we have this perception of Paulie Malignaggi not a powerful puncher. We know he's not a powerful puncher. He never knocks people out, very seldom, doesn't knock them down that much. If he lands 10 really clear, and I'm not making a case for Paulie winning or losing the fight, but I'm saying as an example, he lands 10 great body shots to Adrian Broner that are legal, and that Broner didn't block. Broner lands 3 nice power shots to the head. So what do we do? Do we judge Malignaggi because we think, my own broadcast, and by the way, another admission, I believe when I announced that fight, I bending over backwards, to be fair, so I didn't look like I was, being for Paulie, who was my broadcast partner, I think I really didn't take notice of those punches landing as much as I should have. And I'm not saying, and of course it was a split decision, in which one judge had Paulie the winner. But whatever the case, my own broadcast partner, Mauro Ronaldo, said right before the fight, well, Paulie Malignaggi, the problem is, can he hit hard enough to win this fight? Well, and I talked to Mauro afterwards, and I said, and I said, that's really a tough statement to make, because does he have to hit hard to win a fight? Doesn't have to.
On one of the judges' cards, he didn't.
Right.
You got to.
And so it's intriguing. It raises a lot of interesting questions, and you're right. Of course, power. But see, if a guy lands a power punch, you get credit if you put the man down, right? But how do we know whether a guy was hurt? That fight was a perfect example. Paulie Malignaggi swears to this day, Adrian Broner did not hurt him.
That might be true, but appearance is everything. To answer your rhetorical question.
Go ahead. I'd like you to.
Yeah, about the 10 pity pat punches that landed versus the 3. I think the easiest way I would answer that, and I'm not the trainer for boxing for boxing judges, but the way I would answer that question is, in the aggregate, did those 10 punches do more damage to Broner than Broner's 3 punches in aggregate did to Malignaggi?
How do we determine that?
That's this ultimate subjective part, and I'd like to take the suggestion you had and parlay that into a training opportunity for judges. So you wanted to do the red, yellow buttons, right, where the judges. Yeah. How about instead of them just counting punches, which is going to be really hard to do, right? Because like I said, you're watching 2 fighters.
Yeah.
What we do, and I challenge you guys both, if you really, because you're very fair, Al, especially relative to some of the other commentators and some of the other networks with the way you talk about the judges, I would challenge you guys both to go to an ABC judges training seminar, and you'll see the way they train the judges is, in your mind, you're basically pushing 2 buttons in your mind, left, right, or red, blue, right? And you're pushing those buttons to determine not how many punches are being thrown or landed, but who's winning the round and by how much. So the judge could actually, for training purposes, be pushing the button, and depending on how damaging that punch was, you'd slap the button 3 or 4 times instead of once. And if you just tap the guy, you kind of give it a tap. And if he really hits him and he's staggering, now you push that button 5 or 6 times. And you can kind of let your hands do the work, and then at the end of the round, you just see what your score is. And you don't even have to write down a score. It just is, it's 10-9, or it's 10-8, or it's even 10-7, depending on how dominant it was with the knockdown. So it's an interesting idea that never really clicked in my mind.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to do it. Okay. Yeah, obviously you can tell that this topic is one. I don't get that fired up over most topics in boxing. I'm pretty my equilibrium stays there. It's tough because I think it's an issue for the fans and for everybody. And your service, and let's mention again, Pod Index report, which Matthew has put together and is already helping boxing so much. And go to his website, which is podindex.org, right?
Correct.
And take a look at all his material, and I think there you can see where to go. Fascinating, and to me this is could be a great service for the sport of boxing. Already is in many respects, and I wish you the best with this.
And mixed martial arts. Let's also not forget, and that's the other thing which kind of blows my mind about all this is that he's got this thing set up for both MMA and for UFC or for boxing, and I really suggest everybody get a chance to go with it. Take a look at and play around on his website, because you'll find out. And if you click on any of the individual judges, you'll be able to go and see a full profile and a breakdown on each one of those judges. It's a fantastic website. I really love it. Yep.
That's great. Well, Matthew, I can't tell you how much we appreciate you joining us today for this. And this is, to me, the one great things about doing these Hangouts is we get an extended period of time to really delve into a topic, have somebody like you who's a great spokesman to talk about that topic, and in your case, talk about the work you're doing. And fans get to see it not in a soundbite kind of way. They get to really hear people discuss it, and you can really think about it in a nuanced way.
No, I really appreciate you guys having me on. It was a lot of fun. I enjoy discussing this stuff, and I want to continue to develop it. Any ideas that come out, whether it's from a fan or a producer or anyone, we've been building on this based on feedback over the last few years. That didn't start out this robust. So I also want to give you a belated shout-out. Happy birthday, Al.
Thank you.
Don't think that one didn't slip by me. So.
Oh, you're so kind. It's not every day you're 40. In fact, it wasn't even this day that I was 40, but I appreciate it. I had a nice birthday. I really did have a good birthday, so I very much appreciate it. And I'm going to be coming to your town in Chicago for a very nice thing coming up, so I'm very excited about that. Hopefully I'll get a chance to say hi to you.
Absolutely, I'd love to be there.
All right. Take care, Matt.
Thanks, guys.
Matthew Podgorski, who is, I think his service is really one that is going to help boxing a lot, Dan. And thanks for bringing him on board.
It was my pleasure. And you know what, Al? Also, we want to talk a little bit about. You started to mention you're going to be in Chicago.
I am.
You are being honored, sir, by the Gail Sayers Foundation. And on October 9th, those of you who are over on that side of the coast, there's going to be a great fundraiser going on called the Evening of Stars, Evening with the Stars.
Yeah, it's for the Gail Sayers Foundation, which does great work in the Chicago schools for underserved schools that where they help the kids be more prepared to either go to college or get into the career, help them go right into the job market, to have better technological skills, computer skills, and other things. And so they do great work. And of course, Gail Sayers, an iconic athlete who, of course, everyone loves, and is in Chicago. And I watched him, perform as a Chicago Bear. And they're honoring Ronnie Bull, a great former Bear, and Charles Oakley. And they selected me, and I'm very honored to be. To have that, and it's great to go back to my hometown for an event like that. So you can go to their website, which is, I think, GailSayersFoundation.com. GailSayersFoundation.com, all capital letters, I think, and you can see more information on it. And
I'll be putting a link below for this video, so you'll be able to go there and you can make a donation, or you can get tickets right there.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, it's going to be a very exciting evening. And thanks as always to Dan, thanks to Matthew for his great work, and we'll be seeing you soon.